Hi, you're going to learn how to solder and desolder electronic components step by step. So this is the motherboards that we're gonna use in this course, as you can see. So here, this is the laptop motherboards. This is the power electronics or switch mode power supply motherboards. Okay. Here we have also another motherboards for the SMP's mode power supply. Okay, and we're gonna see also the computer motherboard. So we're going to study and to analyze these motherboards. We're going to solder and desolder the components in those motherboard. Okay, so I will teach you how to desolder and solder electronic components in many motherboards in order to go deeper into understanding the soldering and desoldering operations. Okay, so as you can see here, we're going to see how to solder and desolder. As you can see, I'm going to teach you the good way to solder electronic components. Okay, as you can see, we're going to go deeper and we're going to solder and desolder laptop motherboards like ceramic capacitors, MOSFETs, ICs, etc. Okay, and of course we're going to discuss and I'm going to teach you how to solder small ICs, medium ICs and big ICs, as you can see, like this IC for example. Okay, I'm going to teach you everything about soldering. So here, this is the soldering station that we're gonna use in this course. Okay, so this is the soldering station that contains the hot air gun and the soldering arrow. So as you can see here, we have 3 buttons here, as you can see. So this is the soldering station. As you see, the kind of desoldering is R676 702. Okay, but all the soldering are the same. This is 2 buttons, the power button, as you can see, the 1 button for the hot air. Okay, as you can see here, we have the airflow. This is the airflow button. Okay, so this is the airflow button to adjust the airflow, and here, as you can see, this is the heater switch or button to adjust the heat of the hot air gun. Okay, so as you can see here, we have this switch from 1 to 3 until 8. Okay, so this is the graduation of the hot airflow. So for example, to desolder small capacitors, you should decrease the hot air. Okay, so here we have the heater, as you can see, and the other button is for this switch, as you can see, the Celsius, degrees Celsius. This is for the, as you can see, the soldering iron. Okay, so the gradation is from 100 to 450. Okay, this is the soldering iron. So 100 to 550. Okay, so this is the hot air gun, as you can see, that we're gonna use to desolder ICs, MOSFETs, etc. Okay, of course, to use this you should adjust the airflow and the heat. Okay, so here we have the adapter. There is many kind of adapter. This is a medium adapter. This adapter you can use it to remove or to desolder ICs, but there is other adapters with a small width that you can use to desolder ceramic capacitors or SMD components. So this is the soldering iron, as you can see. Okay, this is the soldering iron. We're gonna use this to desolder some component, especially in the switch mode power supply boards. Okay, so this is the hot air gun and the soldering iron, as you can see. So as you can see here, this is the head of the soldering iron. You should always keep cleaning the soldering iron before and after every operation. Okay, as you can see, always you should keep cleaning the iron using this rubber, this yellow rubber. And here, as you can see, we're gonna use also the soldering paste, as you can see. So the soldering paste, as you can see. So the soldering paste is very important when you want to desolder some components, especially the ICs. As you can see here, the characteristics of the soldering paste, as you can see, to join high intensity, good immersion, neutral, no poison, no origin, good insulation, smooth welding surface, no deterioration or dry, as you can see. So you can use this, as you can see, soldering paste to desolder some components, especially the IC. And here, as you can see, we have the soldering wire. Okay, the soldering wire. We use this wire to solder components in the motherboards. Okay, so this is the soldering wire, as you can see. So here we have this tool, a very important tool. This is the soldering pump. This soldering pump, we use it to remove the old soldering. Okay, so to desolder some components, you should use this soldering pump. Okay, to remove the old soldering and to make things easier. Okay, so we're gonna use also the tweezer, as you can see. We're gonna use this tweezer to adjust or align components and to remove components. Okay, so we're gonna use this tweezer, a very important tool. Also, we're gonna use it, but sometimes there is some big ICs that the tweezer cannot pick, so we will use this tool. As you can see, this is just an electrical wire that I made. Okay, as you can see, you can, for the tweezer it is limited, but this wire you can adjust its width, as you can see, to do IC dimension. Okay, so this is just an electrical wire that I made. Okay, so sometimes we can use this, and as you can see, we're going to use the multimeter. Okay, the multimeter to check some components. So before removing any component, you should first check if this component is bad or not. Okay, so you should always check the serviceability of components before removing it. So as you can see here, this is a switch mode power supply board. Okay, here we have the input power. Okay, so we're going to work in this board. Okay, so as you can see, this is the input connector this is the fuse, as you can see. Okay, here we have the VDR resistor. Okay, so here this is a capacitor for the protection. This is electromagnetic interference to eliminate the high frequencies. Okay, and over here, as you can see, this is the rectifier for diodes, as you can see, the bridge rectifier, and here we have capacitors, double filtering capacitor. Okay, so this is the IC, the oscillator, as you can see. The IC oscillator. This is the transformer, as you can see here. Okay, here this is the diodes, exactly the Schottky diode. Okay, so the rectifier diodes, and here we have capacitors for the filtering. Okay, this is the output stage, and here, as you can see, we have the output. Okay, voltages about 3 volt, 5 volt, 15 volt, etc. So let's see, as you can see here, this is the output voltages. Okay, as you can see. So this is the optocoupler or opto-isolator that is responsible for adjusting power of the output, of course, between the oscillator. Okay, it gives the errors or compensation to the oscillator, and then the oscillator will change the oscillation. So as you can see, this is the back of this board. Okay, so here, as you can see, this is the line and neutral. Okay, so after that we have the fuse here, as you can see. Usually the fuse is connected to the line. Okay, and here we have other components, okay, for the protection, like electromagnetic interference and capacitor, etc. Here this is the transformer, okay, the primary and the secondary stage of the transformer, and here we have the output voltages. Okay, so here this is the opto-isolator, as you can see, always connect between the primary and the secondary stages. Okay, so this is the fuse, as you can see. In the input we're gonna desolder and solder this fuse. Okay, I will show you how to desolder and solder this fuse. Okay, so here we have the terminals of the fuse. So of course the working principle of the soldering and desoldering is the same. You should just apply some steps in order. Okay, so we're gonna use this, as you see, the solder and the soldering pump. Of course, the soldering pump is very important in these operations. Okay, so let's apply the soldering iron to the first terminal. Okay, as you can see. So, and then use the soldering pump to remove the soldering, the old soldering. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the second terminal, as you can see. Now the terminals of the fuse are free. Okay, and then you should always keep cleaning your soldering iron. Okay, always keep cleaning it. So as you can see, now the terminals are free. As you can see, no soldering in it, so we can then remove the fuse without any problem, as you can see. So the pump is very important, the soldering pump. So now let's remove the fuse. As you can see, we remove it easily. Okay, as you can see. Of course, the fuse, you can connect it in both sides. It's not polarized like capacitor or the diode. Okay, so as you can see now, the place of fuse is empty. There is a holes, so let's connect it back. Okay, as I told you, you can connect the fuse in both sides. No, it's not polarized, as you can see. Now the fuse is connected. As you can see, this is two terminals. So you can bend this terminals in order to fix the fuse and then make tank easier, okay, using the soldering iron and the soldering wire, as you can see. So now let's solder these terminals. As you can see, the first terminal, the second terminal. As you can see, just a little bit of soldering wire. Okay, now the fuse is soldered correctly. Okay, as you can see, this is the technique of soldering, and that of course you should clean up your soldering iron. Of course, to cleaning is very important. Now as you can see, the fuse is connected, so let's desolder another component in this board. So let's desolder this component. As you can see, this is a ceramic capacitor. As you can see here, we have ceramic capacitor in this shape, okay, with the reference C. So as you can see, this is its terminals. Let's do the same thing. We're gonna use the soldering iron and the soldering pump. So as you can see, now let's use the soldering pump to remove the old soldering. So let's do the same thing for the next or the second terminal. As you can see, now we remove the old soldering. Now the terminals are free. Let's clean up our soldering iron. So this is the process of desoldering and soldering any component in any motherboard. So as you can see, the terminals are free. Let's now remove, as you can see, the ceramic capacitor. As you can see, because the terminals are free, we can remove it easily. Okay, as you can see, now the ceramic capacitor is removed. Do you see the holes here? No soldering, thanks of the soldering pump. That's why the soldering pump is very important in desoldering operation. Okay, so as you can see here, okay, in the other side, the place of terminals. So let's connect back the ceramic capacitor and then solder it to the motherboard. The same principle. The ceramic capacitor is not polarized. You can connect it in both sides, no problem. Okay, and as you can see, let's bend So we do this technique just to keep the component fixed to the motherboard. Okay, you can use this technique to bend it to make the component fixed to the motherboard while you solder it. Okay, so now as you can see, let's apply the soldering wire. As you can see, the first terminal. This is the technique. As you can see, just a little bit of soldering wire. The second terminal. Okay, as you can see, now the capacitor is connected perfectly. Clean up the soldering iron and then you finish the soldering operation, as you can see. So focus here to see the terminals. As you can see, nice. As you can see, exactly like the original ones. Okay, if you focus here, exactly like the original soldering. Okay, so this is the technique to solder and desolder any components in any electronic board. Okay, so now let's desolder and solder again another component from this motherboard. Just remember that this motherboard is an SMPS motherboard, or switch mode power supply board. So here, as you can see, we have two diodes. This is different from normal diode. This is a Schottky diode. Okay, this is a Schottky diode that we find in the output of any motherboard, as you can see. So the Schottky diode exists in the output of any SMPS board. Here, as you can see, if you focus here, this diode, as you can see, has the cathode, as you can see here, and the anode. Okay, so you should connect it just in one direction. Okay, as you can see here, this mark, this bar or line means the cathode, and the other side is the anode. Okay, so pay attention when you want to connect it to the motherboard. You should not reverse it. The diode and the capacitor you should respect the direction or the polarity. Okay, so let's desolder this component also. So let's use the soldering pump. As you can see, we removed all soldering, so let's do the same thing for the second terminal. Okay, so as you can see, now we can use the soldering pump to remove the old soldering. Now the diode terminals are free. Okay, we can remove it easily. Okay, but always you should pay attention. If you want to solder to the motherboard, you should respect the cathode and the anode. Now we can remove the diode easily without any issue. So let's remove it now. Just use your fingers. As you can see, now the diode is out of the board. So as you can see here, we have two holes, as you can see, because we remove, as you can see, the soldering. So now let's connect it back, but you should pay attention, as I told you before, to the cathode and the anode. Okay, as you can see, this is the right direction. Here we have the cathode, as you can see. So here, so let's bend these two terminals to make things easier. Okay, so this operation is important in order to make the component fixed to the motherboard while you're soldering it. Okay, so now let's solder these two terminals using the same working principle. As you can see, just apply a little bit of soldering wire, as you can see, and make things easier. Now the diode is connected successfully. So do not forget to clean up your soldering iron always, before and after. So as you can see, the soldering terminals are connected nicely. As you can see, exactly the same quality as original soldering. Okay, as you can see, the same quality. So as you can see, this is a switch mode power supply board. Okay, as you can see, or SMPS board. So we're gonna desolder and solder some components in this board. Okay, so this is, as you can see, the input power. Okay, here we have the fuse. This is the capacitor, the electromagnetic interference and protection components. Okay, capacitor. Here we have the transistor or MOSFET, the transformer, as you can see. Okay, this is the primary stage, and as you can see here, as you can see, this is the filtering capacitor, double filtering capacitors. Okay, so this is just an overview. Okay, as you can see, capacitors. As you can see, this is the output stage. Okay, so as you can see, this is, as I told to you, the double filtering capacitor that we gonna desolder and solder. Okay, and so as you can see here, do you see the terminals of the capacitors? Okay, this is, as you can see here, the first capacitor C1833. Okay, and this is the other capacitor. Okay, So these capacitors are polarized, as you can see, plus and minus. This is minus and plus. So first of all, we should clean the soldering iron. Always keep cleaning your soldering iron. Okay, always you should clean the soldering iron before and after the soldering operations. Okay, now the iron is cleaned, as you can see. So we're gonna use the soldering iron with the soldering pump, okay, to desolder these two capacitors. So as you can see here, the first terminal is desoldered, as you can see. So just put the soldering iron in the terminals and use the pump to remove the soldering. Okay, so let's pass now. As you can see, the capacitor now is free. You can remove it easily, as you can see. So let's desolder the second capacitor, okay, and then remove the both capacitors. So the same working principle. This just put the soldering iron in the terminal and use the soldering pump to remove the soldering. So let's pass to the second terminal, as you can see. Okay, so as you can see, now the capacitors are free. Do you see these holes? The capacitors now are free. We can remove it easily. So let's remove these two capacitors, as you can see. Do you see? Using the soldering pump, you make things easier, okay? Because you cannot remove this capacitor using just the soldering iron. Always the soldering pump is necessary, as you can see. This is the capacitor place, as you can see. Here, as you can see, this is the minus. As you can see, the black part is minus, and here we have the plus, or the positive part. Okay, so pay attention when you want to solder or to install the capacitors. You should pay attention to the polarity, okay, minus and plus. Okay, if you inverse it, you can damage the capacitor. So now let's install the capacitors and then solder it using the same working principle. As you can see, the minus with the black part, as you can see. Always pay attention to this step, okay? Because the capacitors, the chemical capacitors, are not like the ceramic capacitors or the resistors. You should respect the polarity. Now, as you can see, as you see, here we have terminals of capacitors. Now we will apply the soldering wire, as you can see. Okay, so let's first clean the soldering iron. As I told you before, always clean your soldering iron. Now let's apply a little bit of soldering wire. As you can see, this is a professional soldering, as you can see. Okay, just use this method and this technique to solder the electronic component. You see? Good. This is a very professional soldering. Okay, easy. And then clean the soldering iron. This is a very important tip. If you don't clean your soldering iron, the soldering iron will not be good. As you can see now, do you see the terminals are soldered correctly? This is a good soldering, exactly like the soldering for the robot or the original soldering. Now we're gonna, as you can see here, this is a resistor. Okay, this is resistor, as you can see. This kind of compound is a resistor. Here we have the ceramic capacitors. Okay, do you see ceramic capacitors? The ceramic capacitors are not polarized capacitor. This is the reference of these capacitors. Always begin with C. Okay, So as you can see here in the other side, this is it. So let's remove these two capacitors. This is C815. So let's desolder these two capacitors using, of course, the soldering iron with the soldering pump. Okay, so we're gonna use the same working principle. First, let's touch the terminal with the soldering iron and then use the soldering pump to remove the soldering, the old soldering. Okay, so that's why I told to you that if you clean the soldering iron from time to time, you will keep it always serviceable and you will make things easier for you. But if you don't clean it, the soldering iron will not be ready for good soldering. So let's desolder the second ceramic capacitor. So this is, so as you can see here we have this button. Okay, this is the working principle for the pump. Just press the button, then you will remove the soldering, the old soldering. So now as you can see, the ceramic capacitors terminals are free, as you can see. Now we can remove these two ceramic capacitors easily. Okay, so let's remove it. So this is the first one, as you can see. These capacitors are not polarized capacitors. You can install it in both directions, no problem. This is the second one, as you can see. Okay, they don't have the plus and minus. Okay, no plus and minus. So let's install back these two capacitors. So let's install the second capacitor. So now we will apply the soldering wire to the capacitor terminals. So here we have, as you can see, the first capacitor. Okay, so the second terminal of the first capacitor. Okay, let's pass now to the second capacitor. You see the technique of soldering? Okay, this is the way, the correct way to deseal. So always clean your soldering iron. Okay, always before and after. Now the capacitors, as you can see, are soldered to the motherboard. Now we're gonna desolder this resistor, as you can see. So we will use the same working principle to desolder this resistor. As you can see, this is the reference of the resistor, as you can see. Okay, we will find the same reference in the other side. Okay, so let's see. As you can see, here we have R805, as you can see, the same reference. Okay, R805 means resistor 805. So we're gonna desolder this resistor using the same working principle, always using the soldering iron with the soldering pump. Okay, So to remove any components, we use the soldering iron with the soldering pump, and to solder it back, we use the soldering iron with the soldering wire. Okay, so as you can see, using the soldering pump, we remove the old soldering. So let's clean the soldering iron. After finishing the soldering operation, now as you can see, the resistor is free, the terminals of the resistors are free. As you can see, we can now remove it easily. As you can see, now the resistor is removed. Okay, as you can see, here this is the place of the resistors terminals. You see the hole here, 2 holes. That's why we use the soldering pump. So let's solder back this resistor. Okay, so let's just align it to its place, and then apply a little bit of the soldering wire. As you can see, terminals. So let's use the same working principle. We will apply a little bit of soldering wire over the resistor terminals. Okay, so as you can see, just put the soldering iron and touch it with the soldering wire. So let's solder the second terminal. As you can see, don't use a lot of soldering wire. And finally, let's clean our soldering iron to make it always clean for the next soldering and desoldering operations. Now, as you can see, this is R85 desoldering, a very good soldering. This is a very professional soldering. Okay, we will begin with the small ICs. As you can see here, we have U63 and U62. We're gonna desolder these ICs. I will show you how to desolder these ICs. This is just a small ICs. Of course, we're gonna desolder medium ICs and other big ICs, but first let's desolder these ICs. So let's get started. Of course, as you can see, we're gonna use just the hot air gun with the tweezer. Now the first IC is removed easily without any difficulties. Okay, so let's put the IC and then continue desoldering the second IC. Okay, always you should check using the tweezer. Now the IC is removed. Good, easily. Now I show you the easy way to remove these ICs. If you adjust your hot air station, you can remove any IC you want. So as you can see here, so always, as I told you before, you should pay attention to the first pin. Always the first pin is marked with the dot or the point in the IC and the white mark in the PCB. Okay, and now let's align the ICs in their places. Okay, always you should first align the IC. Of course, you can use the soldering paste if you want to fix the ICs. So as you can see, now we solder the ICs using always the hot air station or the hot air gun. Okay, you can move of course the hot air gun in order to avoid the overheat. Okay, now the ICs are connected, as you can see, successfully. Okay, now the ICs are good. As you can see, the ICs are in their places. Okay, as you can see. So let's desolder another IC. This is also another IC with more pins, as you can see. So this is the charge IC, as you can see. So this is the charge IC for this motherboards, as you can see. White mark means the pin number 1. Okay, so this is the charge IC circuit. As you can see, we have here, as you can see, the component of charge IC circuit. This is the current sense resistor. As you can see, this white component here, this is a connector, the input power connector. Okay, this is another current sense resistors. So let's begin our operation of desoldering this IC. So we will desolder this IC using the same working principle. Okay, you can just check using the tweezer, and you can move the hot air gun, as you can see, in order to avoid the overheat in the body of the IC. Now the IC is removed, as you can see. Okay, easily. This is the place of the IC in the PCB. Okay, this is a dual IC because the pins is in both sides. Now let's solder the IC again back. So the first step is to align it. Okay, always you should align the IC and pay attention to the first pin always. Okay, so let's align it carefully. Okay, and of course you should always pay attention to the small components around the IC when you want to remove it or to solder it. Okay, because if you don't pay attention, you can damage or move the components around the ICs, like ceramic capacitors and small resistors. So always you should pay attention. As you can see here, we have the soldering paste. Of course you can use the soldering paste. If you want, you can use the soldering paste. You can just apply a small amount of soldering paste in the body of the IC. So the soldering paste makes the soldering operation easier. Okay, so you can use it, and also it protects the body of the IC. Okay, so you can use the soldering paste, or you can easily use the hot air gun without soldering paste, no problem. Okay, but for the big ICs you have to use the soldering paste. Okay, to facilitate the desoldering and soldering operations. Okay, now the IC, as you can see, is connected easily. Okay, so now we're gonna desolder another IC, as you can see, with the pins in the 4 sides, as you can see. So I will show you how to desolder this kind of ICs. Okay, because there is many types of ICs, but for this IC you should pay attention for these capacitors, because the capacitors are sensitive to the temperature. Okay, so pay attention always when you want to desolder or solder a component next to capacitors, you should pay attention. Do not apply directly the heat to the capacitors. So now let's apply a small amount of the flux and then try to desolder this IC, as you can see. Of course, using two tools, the hot air gun and the tweezer. So as you can see, the IC is desoldered easily. Okay, so always pay attention to the component around the IC. As you can see, we remove the IC easily. Okay, so this is the IC that we have removed, as you can see. And of course, you should always pay attention to the first pin. This is a very important tip. Always pay attention to the first pin, because if you install or you solder the IC wrongly, you can damage other components next to it, or even you can damage the Super I/O for the charge IC. That's why you should always pay attention to the first pin. You should always pay attention to the point or to the dot in the body of the IC should be next to the white mark or to the white point in the PCB. Okay, so now let's align the IC. As you can see, we're gonna align the IC to its place in the PCB. Should take your time to align any component to the PCB, because if you don't align it to its place, you can make a short circuit. Okay, you can make a short circuit and then damage the motherboard or the other circuits in the motherboard. Now, as you can see, the IC is aligned correctly, as you can see. Okay, always the ICs with 4 sides of pins require more attention, okay, to align it correctly. So now let's solder the IC. As you can see, you can move and circle the hot air gun in order to avoid the overheat in the body of the IC. Okay, now the IC is soldered. Okay, as you can see. So let's check it using the tweezer. As you can see, good, the IC is soldered. Now we go in to desolder another IC. In this time, this is a bigger IC than the ICs that we have already desoldered. As you can see, this is the first pin. Here we have the dot and the white mark or the white dot. So now let's get started and desolder this IC. Of course, this is another IC with 4 sides pins. Okay, of course, with the same working principle, you can use the soldering paste, okay, to facilitate this soldering operation. As you can see, you can just apply a small amount of soldering paste in the body of the IC, okay, and then go ahead and desolder it. Okay, so as you can see in this course, I'm going to show you how to desolder mini ICs and mini components in order to master the desoldering and soldering process. Okay, so now as you can see, the IC is removed easily, as you can see, even if this IC is bigger than the others that we have seen before, but the process is the same. Okay, the process is the same. And as I told you before, you can just adjust the hot air gun station to 350 in temperature. Now as you can see here, we have the IC, as you can see. So this is the body of the IC, as you can see. So now let's solder it back. Okay, focus always, you should pay attention to the first pin. Now let's align the IC. Always you should pay attention to the first pin. Okay, the dot or the point in the body of the IC should be next to the white mark or to the white dot or to the white line in the PCB. So now let's align the IC in order to avoid the short circuit. Okay, so if you don't align the IC correctly, you can make a short circuit in the motherboard, because if you don't align it, you can make a short circuit between two pins. Now as you can see, the IC is aligned correctly, as you can see here, and the points here we have the pin number 1. Okay, so good. So now let's use the hot air gun to solder the IC. Now the IC is connected successfully. So now as you can see, let's apply a little amount of soldering paste in this IC. This is the audio controller IC. Okay, so now let's desolder this IC. As you can see, we're gonna use always the heat gun with the tweezer. As you can see, now the IC is removed. The smoke, as you can see, is just the smoke of the soldering paste. This is the point here, and here we have this mark, means the pin number 1. Okay, so now let's solder again the IC, but first let's apply a little bit of the soldering paste in order to make the IC fixed in each place. Okay, so we can just apply a little bit. Okay, as you can see. Then let's align the IC. Always we should pay attention to the pin number 1. Always the hole or the point in the IC over the IC should be next to the first pin in the motherboard, that is determined with the white mark. Okay, now the IC is aligned. As you can see, the IC now is aligned in its place. As you can see, we have the point is next this dot, white dot, means the IC is aligned correctly. As I told you before, if you don't align the IC in its place, or if you don't place the IC correctly, you can create a short circuit in the motherboard. So now let's solder the IC. As you can see, always try to move the hot air gun in a circular movement in order to avoid damaging the IC. So now we're gonna desolder this big IC. This is the Super IO or the Super Input Output IC. So let's desolder this IC. As you see, this is a big IC that contains about 64 pins. Okay, so let's apply a little bit of the soldering paste over its pins. Okay, as I told you before, the soldering paste has many advantages. The first characteristic of soldering paste is the protection of the IC. Okay, now let's desolder the IC. Okay, so let's desolder the IC by moving the hot air gun in a circular movement. And as you can see, I will use this tweezer that I made from a wire, an electric wire, because I can adjust the width of this tweezer. Now the IC is removed successfully. Okay. Always avoid to take the IC from its pins. Never touch the pins of the IC, never, because if you touch its pins, you can bend it or broken it. Always take the IC from edges. Okay, avoid to touch the pins of the IC. Okay, so as you can see, the IC is, all IC pins are good. Here we have the first pin, the dot. Here we have the white mark. Okay, so now let's put back the IC and solder it to the motherboard, but first we should align it correctly. And as I told you before, always take your time and align the IC. Okay, always take your time, because if you don't align it correctly, it can be damaged. You can create a short circuit, then you can damage other circuit in the motherboard. So now let's solder the IC. As you can see, always, as I told you before, you can adjust your hot air station. Just put in the temperature 350 and adjust the air in accordance with the component you want to remove. Now the IC, as you can see, is connected. Okay, as you can see. Now we're gonna remove another IC. As you can see, this is a very big IC, as you can see. So let's apply with the same working principle a little bit of soldering paste in the IC pins. As you can see, this is the soldering paste. As you can see here, advanced quality, join, high intensity. As you can see, good immersion, neutral, no Poisson or erosions, good insulation, smooth welding surface, no deterioration, no dry, and many others characteristics. So as I told you, this is a very big IC, so this tweezer, I cannot use this tweezer because the length of this tweezer is not enough. That's why I made this tweezer, okay, from an electric wire. Okay, this tweezer I can adjust its length, okay, because this is a big IC. I can use this tweezer that I made from an electric wire. So now let's begin the desoldering operation. Always desolder the IC by moving the hot air gun in a circular movement, as you can see, because if you apply the heat in just one point on the IC, you can burn it or damage it. Okay, so avoid to apply the heat in just one point. Okay, now let's check. The IC is still connected to the motherboard, so let's continue applying the heat. Okay, finally, as you can see, we removed the IC. So the smoke is just the burned soldering paste. Okay, this is the soldering paste that is burned. Okay, this smoke is not that the IC is burned. No, just the soldering paste are burned. The soldering paste is burned. Okay, so as you can see, this is the IC to contain more than 100 pins. Now let's solder it back. Okay, the same working principle. After aligning it to the motherboard, you can apply the heat in a circular movement in order to solder it correctly. Okay. So as you can see, we apply now the hot air. Now the IC, as you can see, is connected. So now this is the BIOS IC. This is the first pin. As you can see, we have this dot. So this is the BIOS IC that contains the pins in both sides. So we're gonna desolder and solder this IC. Normally, the BIOS that is used in many motherboards is the BIOS with 8 pins, but also in some motherboards you can find this kind of BIOS. This is the BIOS chip, okay, that contains the program. So now, as you can see, let's apply the hot air to this BIOS IC. So let's check using the tweezer if the IC is ready to be removed. Now the IC is removed, as you can see. As I told to you, always avoid to touch the IC in its pins, because if you touch its pins, you can break the pins or damage it. So always avoid to touch the ICs in its pins. Okay. So now, after aligning the IC, we can solder it back to the motherboard. Okay. So as you can see here, this is the BIOS IC. So we're gonna desolder this BIOS IC. This BIOS, as you can see, contains the pins in all sides, as you can see. Okay. So let's apply a little soldering paste over the body of the BIOS. As you know, the soldering paste can protect the BIOS from the overhead, okay, or the IC in general, and also it makes the desoldering operation easier. Okay, so as you see, let's apply a little bit of the soldering paste around the BIOS, and let's use our hot air station gun in order to desolder the BIOS. So as you can see, always try to move the gun, the soldering head gun, in the circle. Okay, as you can see here, move it around the IC in order to make the head in all sides of the IC. So let's check using the tweezer. So let's continue applying the head. Now let's try. As you can see, now the BIOS IC is removed easily without any problem, as you can see. Okay, so this is the place of the BIOS, as you can see, IC. So this is normally, this is a big IC. It contains the pins in 4 sides, as you can see. So of course this is an old BIOS, but the used BIOS now in usually in the laptop motherboard is the BIOS IC with 8 pins. So now let's align the BIOS in each place. Okay, always take your time to align the ICs in order to avoid the short circuit. Okay, always take your time until you align the IC 100%. Okay, because if you don't align it, you can make a short circuit. So now let's apply the head to the IC. Okay, always, as you can see, in a circle, move the gun in a circle, as you can see. Okay, never apply the heat in just one point in order to avoid to damage the ICs. Now, as you can see, the IC is connected, as you can see. Okay. Now let's see another IC. This is another IC, as you can see. So normally this is an frequency IC. So you will find this kind of IC in every laptop motherboard and also computer motherboard. So this IC always is near to the CPU, as you can see. This IC is responsible for generating the clocks or the frequency for the whole circuits in the motherboard. So after applying a little bit of soldering paste, let's now desoldering the IC, as you can see. So let's check. Easy. So the IC is desoldered successfully, okay, without any issues, as you can see. And as you can see, I used this kind of tweezer that I made from an electrical wire, okay, for the big ICs, okay. And I used the normal tweezer for just MOSFETs and small ICs. As you can see, this is the place of the IC, as you can see. Clean place. Our pins slots are correct. As you can see, always pay attention to the pin number 1, always the point or the dot of the IC should be aligned with the first pin that is marked with a white, as you can see, color or a white mark. Now let's align the IC, okay, always using the same working principle, okay, always after aligning the IC, okay, take your time, always take your time to align the IC. So the most important step in the motherboard repairing, when you want to desolder or where you want to solder an IC, you should take your time until you align correctly the IC, okay. So as you can see here, the IC is aligned, as you can see, very easy, okay. The IC is aligned 100%. Now we can apply the heat over the IC, as you can see, in a circle movement, okay. Do not apply the heat in just one point, because if you do so, you can damage the IC, okay. Now the IC is soldered to the motherboard, okay. So let's check. As you can see, okay, the IC is soldered. Good. So as you can see, the IC is soldered correctly, okay. All pins are connected to the motherboard, okay, as you can see. And the components, as you can see, around the IC are good, no problem in the component around the IC,